So when talking about the Clean Water Act, I said that it regulates point source pollution because it's easy to. I can look at where that water is coming from. I can point to the source and I can tell that source, hey, you need to regulate your temperature. You need to regulate the mercury you're releasing. It's easy. It's doable. However, a lot of our pollution, especially when looking at plastic pollution, is non-point source. So we can't point to the source. So here's two examples of non-point source pollution. Here's an agriculture field. Now remember when we're looking at the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, we know it's caused by the agriculture farms and their fertilizer that are coming down the Mississippi River. But whose farm? We don't know, because when it rains, it washes off the nutrients from a farm, and this farm, and that farm, and that farm over there, and it drains into a water body. Now, when I look at the pollution in that water body, I know it came from a farm, but I don't know who. I can't say, hey, Joe, your farm's polluting a lot. I need to regulate you. It's impossible to do. And by the time we get to the Gulf of Mexico, there were thousands of farms that contributed to that problem. But we have no way of knowing which one it was. Another example is here's a parking lot, and you can see this rainbowy color, and maybe when you were a kid, I know I did, I thought this was the coolest thing, like, oh, look at the rainbow color. And then you get older and you realize it's oil, and that's really bad. But although we see all this oil in the parking lot, I have no idea what car it came from. It might not even be from cars that were in this parking lot. It may have been from cars that were in that parking lot yesterday, or last week, or last month. We don't know. And so when that washes into a water body, I say, oh, there's oil, and it's from a car, but I don't know whose car. I can't blame someone. I can't say, like, hey, Caitlin, your car, like, is contributing to this oil pollution. I don't know that. I have no way of knowing that. And so non-point source pollution is very hard to regulate because it's very hard to blame a specific person. And if it's hard to blame a specific person, it's hard to put rules on that person, because we don't know who to put those rules on. For point source pollution, it's easy. Hey, chemical company A, you release pollution through this pipe. Don't do that. Non-point source pollution is a lot harder. And because it's a lot harder to regulate, it causes a lot of big problems in our environment, because it's really hard for us to limit it. Now there's one caveat, because usually when you think non-point source pollution, you don't think of a pipe. You just think, oh, there's water in the environment. And with point source pollution, you do think of a pipe. You're like, oh, here's a pipe, here's the company. But here's an exception. Here's a pipe that has water coming out of it. And so looking at it, you might think, oh, that's a point source polluter. But in actuality, it's not. That is actually a stormwater drain. So this pipe that's leading into a river actually came from this. You have seen these everywhere, these stormwater drains. They do drain into a pipe, but remember, stormwater is this parking lot water. Stormwater is just the water from your roads and from your yards and from everything. And so although it does end up in a pipe, that doesn't mean it's point source. I still don't know. If I look at all this trash right here and the chemicals coming off here, I have no idea who it is. It might be that neighborhood up the way, but I don't know, like, who exactly did it. I don't know if it was a car. I don't know if it was someone throwing trash over their balcony. I don't know if it was a trash man who came through. I have no idea. So stormwater drains, and we'll talk more about stormwater in a moment, are not point source. They might look like it, but they're not. Think about where that water came from. If you don't know the exact person or that exact company that water came from, it's going to be non-point source pollution. So I say this because students sometimes think, oh, pipe means point source. That's not always the case. Stormwater pollution is definitely an exception to that. So let's talk a little bit about more of those stormwater systems. So a stormwater system, as the name implies, is storm water. When it rains a lot, that water has to go somewhere. The water on our roads, the waters on our driveways, on our buildings. So what we did as a society, we built stormwater systems. It's a series of drains, it's a series of pipes that take all that water that accumulated on land and then direct it into a water body. And this really helps with local flooding. Typically, flooding doesn't happen in an urban area unless all the stormwater drains have flooded. So their main goal is to stop flooding. You've seen these everywhere. They exist everywhere. Now, the thing with stormwater systems, kind of a downside to stormwater systems, is that they are not connected to the sewer system. So remember, a sewer system, we talked about your wastewater that you generate in your home. If you're not on a septic system, you're on the sewer system, where all of the pipes in your household will eventually go to a wastewater treatment plant where that water will get cleaned and released to the environment. However, most stormwater systems are a completely different system. So looking at the same household, here it was raining and the water is falling off the driveway and off the roads and going into a stormwater drain, and it goes through its own series of pipes, but it never gets treated. That water is not cleaned. It's just the water that rushed off of everything will go directly into the environment. And that's not good. And we'll talk about kind of the caveats as to why. But just in this picture, it shows you, everything that was on our surfaces is getting washed up in that stormwater system. And so we have tons and tons of these pollutants that are collecting in our stormwater and not getting cleaned at all. And so that actually causes a huge issue with water pollution. But again, this is all non-point source. By the time the water gets here into this local river, I've got no idea where it came from. It may have came from your house or your neighbor's house or the neighborhood across the way. It may have came from Walmart parking lot. We don't know. And so we have this huge source of pollution and very little ways of regulating it because there's so many people. You just regulate everyone. Well, how do you do that? How would you enforce that? Now, there are some cool systems out there. In some cities, typically older cities, what used to be common was having a combined sewer and stormwater system, meaning that the sewer and stormwater pipes were actually the same pipes. And all the water that came from the sewer and came from stormwaters, all of it went to a wastewater treatment plant, which is great because that means all that water is being cleaned before going back into the environment. So if we look at this picture on the left, here's looking at a dry, sunny day. Here is an apartment building. Here's all their sewage water. Here's a storm drain. There might be some water. Maybe someone washed their car or something. And it goes through this pipe, and it goes through this pipe, and eventually it goes to a wastewater treatment plant. So all the water is being cleaned. So huge benefit. And you might think, well, why don't we all do that? Well, we're actually moving away from this system, because it's not a very good system if it rains, and if it rains often. So here is an example, same exact picture, same exact scenario, except now it's a rainy day. And if it's a rainy day, that means stormwater is backed up. It's draining all the streets and rooftops and everything and going down a storm drain. So here's that sewer, again, coming from the apartment building. But now we're collecting the rain from, say, the downspout, what was being accumulated from the top of the building. It's going into the sewer pipe. Here's that storm drain, super full of water, going down that storm pipe. But the thing is that the wastewater treatment plant can treat but so much water at a time. You do not want to flood a wastewater treatment plant. So it's actually the amount of water that goes into a wastewater treatment plant at any moment of the day is regulated. And if it hits a certain maximum, then it literally cannot take it. And so in these combined sewer systems, they have an outflow pipe or an overflow pipe. And what those pipes do is that if there's too much water, some of that water will directly enter the local water body, whereas the rest of it is going to go to the wastewater treatment plant. And again, this doesn't happen often. It's only happening usually during very wet weather. But the thing is that this water going into that water body is untreated. It's not just untreated stormwater. This was also sewage. This was raw sewage from a human household. And so in these systems, during a rainy event, they will literally like shut down that river or shut down that pond or that part of the ocean to the public because there's literally human feces in there and human waste, which is a breeding ground for very harmful bacteria. So although yes, on a sunny day, this is a great system. It treats our stormwater. We don't have to worry about that water pollution. On a rainy day, we have to worry about worse pollution. That raw sewage is actually going into our local water body. This is actually an issue in parts of Washington, D.C. Parts of Washington, D.C. actually have a combined sewer system. And after a rainy day, if you go over, I think it's called the Roosevelt Bridge, it's the bridge between Virginia and Maryland on the south side of D.C., you will actually smell the sewage after a rainy day because they had too much water and it went into an outfall pipe. So there are benefits, but there's also drawbacks. If you take a look at this video, this is actually looking at a video in Rhode Island that they have a combined sewer system. And they're talking about, although there are benefits, they really focus on the downsides and some of the issues with their combined sewer system. And how we in the United States are trying to change these, but a lack of funding is really holding us back. So go ahead and pause here, take a look at this video popping up, take a look at this town in Rhode Island, and then come back here.